So as usual, Will is here once again with the business, and we said it an hour ago. We've got an EU summit for you. Latest on the Eurozone crisis, that's what they're going to be talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Spain and Greece, of course, at the centre of the agenda. Spain is going to be asking today, actually, for its €100 billion bank bailout officially. Of course, that was requested, or it was flagged up a couple of weeks ago now, but it is going to be put in writing today. Details, though, are still to be finalised, particularly over where exactly the money ends up, how it's channelled to those banks, because the plan is, under EU rules at the moment, it goes via the central government, and the worry is that piling an extra €100 billion of debt onto the Spanish government might worry the bond markets even more and make it more difficult for the government to borrow, even though the money is actually for the banking system.
And Greece has come out with a bit of a list of demands.
Yeah, it says it's going to stick to its bailout commitments, which have been agreed, of course, over the course of 2 different bailouts already. But it does say it wants a 2-year extension to those same commitments and also trying to make changes to pensions and pay. So there are also concerns over whether Thursday's EU summit it can be productive because, of course, 2 key members of the Greek government have been taking medical leave and aren't going to be there on Thursday. Let's take a look at the details.
This is where the Greek Prime Minister is staying, and he won't be leaving for some time. Less than 1 week after taking office, Antonis Samaras is in hospital after an urgent eye operation. His doctors say he's recovering well, but is not fit enough to travel yet.
As to whether he can travel abroad for the Eurogroup meeting, I categorically state that he cannot travel. He's recovering from major surgery and needs to stay in bed.
The newly appointed Finance Minister, Vasilis Rapanos, has also fallen ill and will miss the EU summit. Representatives from the Troika have cancelled their planned visit to Athens. Greece's Foreign Minister and outgoing Finance Minister will attend the meeting instead. They face an uphill battle as the government hopes to renegotiate the terms of the €130 billion bailout deal agreed in February. Under growing pressure from the public, Athens wants to seek a 2-year extension to the 2014 deadline to cut its budget deficit to 2.1% of GDP. It also hopes to freeze or reduce public sector layoffs, though it promised to cut 150,000 jobs by 2015. The government wants to keep paying unemployment benefits for 2 years instead of 1 year as promised. Athens' request will likely meet stern opposition from Europe's paymaster, Germany. Its finance minister said Greece should stop asking for more help and instead move quickly to enact the reform measures already agreed. The EU meeting comes at a crucial time for Greece. It needs €7.6 billion by the end of July to cover maturing debt.
Oh dear, lots of sympathy for the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, but sympathy with Greece as a whole seems to be in short supply in the Eurozone.
Yeah, well, certainly in Germany and France. Let's take a look at a survey done by IFOP and a French newspaper called the Journal du Dimanche. And you can see there they asked if Greece can't reduce its debt and deficit, do you think the country should leave the euro? And least sympathetic there, of course, Germany, as we'd expect from the country's policy positions, etc. France not far behind them. But you can see Italy and Spain there, lagging behind. They're much more sympathetic to the Greeks because, of course, they've got debt issues of their own to a much greater extent even than France. And, of course, Germany has some worries. But also, there are people in the Eurozone have been asked, do they want to revert to their previous currency, i.e. the drachma, the lira, the Deutschmark? And here it's a bit different. It's generally against that idea quite strongly. France, you can see 74% of people against going back to the franc. They're keen to stick with the euro, perhaps surprisingly, after all this time of Eurozone crisis. You can see there again, though, Germany is the exception, although they do still want to keep the euro. 61% is a lower figure than the others. There's a lot of nostalgia there for the Deutschmark.
OK, let's have a look at the markets then, Asian ones, obviously.
OK, well, it's been another difficult day on the Asian markets. Things are a little bit mixed at the moment, but broadly speaking, most markets there, as you can see, are in the red. Still, of course, a bit of a hangover from last week's bad data across the global markets, really, which pointed to a slowdown in global production and maybe a bit worried about the Eurozone summit later this week.
Going to talk France now. The new government here in France getting down to business on the budget internally.
Yeah, and about time too, I suppose you could say, because, of course, François Hollande has been putting this decision off for a while, but during his campaigning, he tended to focus on tax rises for the rich, made quite a good campaigning slogan, he might have thought. Of course, spending cuts, not quite so popular with voters, so he's kept quiet about them, but he does have to decide if he wants to keep France within its 3% deficit limit, which is set by the EU and which the President has said he'll keep to. So today, the Prime Minister, Jean-Marc Ayrault, he is meeting with ministers this afternoon to talk about the budget, and it's expected they're going to have to decide finally where the axe is going to fall. It's not going to be popular wherever it falls, but we are going to see finally where the cuts are going to come.
Okay, well, speaking of that 75% top rate that, of course, France is talking about slapping on its richest people, the UK's David Cameron said last week that if France introduces such high taxes, the UK will roll out the red carpet for French entrepreneurs. Now, the comment didn't go down that well on this side of the channel, but in London there are already many French companies taking advantage of the competitive business climate.
Just 2 hours on the Eurostar from Paris is Ashford International in the heart of England. It's the ideal location for French editor Olivier Cadic and his comic book business, and the fine English food isn't the only attraction.
Back in 1996, I discovered by chance the difference in social security contributions paid by French and British employers. In France, it's 48%, in the UK, 10%. I moved here to protect my business, which otherwise would have gone under thanks to international competition.
To help French entrepreneurs make the move across the pond is David Blanc. Since the recent elections in France, business is going rather well.
In recent weeks, we've had a number of inquiries from French business owners potentially looking to relocate to the UK, on the one hand for company tax rates, but also for personal fiscal reasons.
It's a trend that's reflected in other areas like housing. In this exclusive London neighborhood, John Waters is awaiting the arrival of new French clients.
So this apartment is very typical of the sort of property that a French buyer would look for in London.
Desirable address indeed.
On his company's website, the number of French people searching for London properties costing upwards of 6 million euros has jumped by 33% in the last 6 months.
When Hollande announced that there would be a wealth tax for people earning 1 million euros or more, we saw a spike in the number of searches for very high-end properties in London.
It seems a number of French people have already set up shop in London. Whether the trend will grow or slow depends on the reforms taken by Hollande's government this summer.
Yeah, picture the UK. We're going to stay in the UK, actually, because one of the country's major banks, its services, they ground to a halt. This is a bizarre story, isn't it?
Yeah, this is NatWest, owned by banking giant RBS. They had a bit of a software upgrade issue. I'm sure we've all had a similar thing when upgrading to the latest version of Windows or something like that. But unfortunately for the bank, this meant it couldn't process payments for its retail banking customers.
That's bit of a problem.
Yeah, businesses and individuals, a huge problem. And that was late on Tuesday night. And it's been going on right up and through the weekend, really. The bank had to open its branches on Sunday for the first time in its history to try and deal with the backlog. Now, they do say things that will be largely back to normal this Monday, but of course there still will be a few knock-on effects as people have missed payments, and they say they're going to waive any overdraft fees that may have been incurred. You can see here the apology on the website of NatWest from the head of the RBS group saying that it is something that should not have happened. Yeah, red faces all round at NatWest.
What's the advice on Twitter?
Oh yes, the guy said turn it off and turn it on again.
Fantastic. That would have solved the problem that happens everywhere else, doesn't it? Bankers, though, still being adequately rewarded, even though NatWest has broken down. Still get their money, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, despite the difficulties faced by banks, in particular in the financial crisis, the top executives are doing rather well, according to research in the Financial Times. They looked at 15 top bank chiefs' pay. It's up almost 12% in 2011 to an average of $12.8 million. Top of the list is Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase, up to $23 million there, up 11%. Of course, he's the one who runs a company that unfortunately made a $2 billion accidental loss, trading loss, a few weeks ago. So probably not mentioning that at his annual review. But
probably not.
And Barclays' Bob Diamond similarly got $25 million, despite rating his bank's performance unacceptable in 2011. But there you go.
Excellent. All right, thank you very much, Will. We will switch everything off in here for the next few seconds, and we'll switch it all on again for Lorna. She'll be here very shortly with the latest news at the top of the hour. Stay with us.